Welcome to the Live Well for Longer podcast, the podcast for people who want to learn the art and science of healthy aging and longevity. Join me, Sarah Little, a wellbeing science specialist and positive psychology practitioner, as I share the psychology and behaviours associated with longevity and quality of life. Let's begin. A well-lived life is one where we have the proper systems in place. Systems such as our habits help us to live a long and fruitful life. One of the things I love about centenarians and near-centenarians is that they often have an increased quality of life for their age. So they're often very exuberant and vibrant, and they get on and they live quite a healthy life up until the age that they pass over. And habits is what helps them to live that long, healthy, and happy life. In today's episode, we will discuss the habits of near-centenarians and centenarians living in the blue zones. This is a hot topic right now, and for good reason, because habits are what shape our life. Now, what I am interested in and what I would like to share with you today are the personality habits, the way people think, and the behavioural habits. So what people do to live until they're 100 and to live until they're 100 in a very fruitful and vibrant way. So to begin with, we're going to start with habit formation number one. Longevity habit formation number one is social relationships. I know you've heard me talk about this on the podcast a lot, but until you actually make it a habit, then really it's a goal, it's a wish. And I think a lot of us wish for strong bonds. And I myself have been there. When I first moved to Australia, I didn't know anybody. But as soon as I started to make it a habit to go out and meet people, I used to go to Toastmasters and networking meetings. As soon as I made it a habit to consistently socialize, then that's when my life started to take on a new direction. That is when I started to become happier and healthier. Now, I think a lot of times we kind of withdraw socially because we have these thoughts in our head that maybe we're introverts, or maybe we are not social creatures, or it's too hard to socialize, or the idea that maybe nobody in our area is actually, our type of person. I know my partner, he has this idea that he doesn't know anyone that he kind of wants to meet up with regularly. And there are these beliefs that we can sometimes have, which prevent us from going out there and making it a habit to consistently socialize. And the thing with habits is once you get into the routine, then that's when a lot of your mindset, these thoughts begin to shift. One of the things I think we forget, or we just really ignore a lot, especially in the self-help world and within psychology and positive psychology, is we ignore the environment that we are in or that we keep placing ourselves in. And instead we look to our mindset, our thoughts, our beliefs, and our feelings. But I'd like you to flip the script here and start to see the reverse. So instead of having to think yourself into being social and think yourself into being comfortable and outgoing and seeing yourself as the social creature, I want you to just take some small steps and put yourself into environments where you can begin to be social. So whether that is choosing um, like one event that you can go to each week, such as yoga or a swimming class or tai chi or qigong. Put yourself into a social setting each week, regularly, consistently, and you'll find that the behavior and the environment will shift your mindset. And I've experienced this in my own life. At the start of 2023, I said I wanted to be more social. And I live in a very small town. There's not that many things happening. So I decided I would bloom where I was planted and I would make the most of my situation. And I just started going to events that I thought would help me to um, become more social. And certainly the events were great and I enjoyed them. But it wasn't the fact that I decided that I wasn't going to be an introvert anymore. It wasn't the fact that I didn't think it was hard. It wasn't the fact that I I wasn't going to shift my mindset. My mindset shifted when I started doing the activities, not when I started thinking positively or thinking I was extroverted. And I became more social as a result of feeling the fear and doing it anyway, which is a quote from Susan Jeffers. I think she wrote her book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It may be in the 80s or 90s. It's a very old book, but it's a very good book. And so the first habit of people who live a long and fruitful life is that they have strong social bonds. So I ask you to commit to one social experience each week and put yourself into that place. And you'll likely find that that habit of showing up into a social situation each week will create a ripple of other habits. So longevity habit number one is to have strong social bonds and start small. Okay, number two, let's move on now. Number two is leisure activities. So people who live until they are a long and healthy life have activities they do on a daily basis that they enjoy and look forward to. Now, there's two types of overarching themes here with leisure activities. Is meaningful activities and there's hedonic activities. If you want to learn more about activities in general, because I do discuss this in detail about how to craft activities that elevate rest and that elevate your life so you are well rested and you have a well lived life, then please see my previous episode. So there's two overarching themes when it comes to leisure activities. There is a theme of meaning in life. So you can have a leisure activity that you find you have a sense of you derive a sense of meaning from. So a sense of meaning from is, it could be anything. It could be writing, it could be knitting, it could be yoga, it could be gardening, but this is something you derive a sense of meaning from. And often when we have this sense of meaning, we get into this state of flow. And Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is the founding father of the flow state and flow theory. And flow is when we are in the moment and we lose ourselves to the activity. A flow state is experienced also when we are doing something that is inside our comfort zone, but also just on the edge of it. So we're breaking through to the next level. And so we're experiencing this flow state where time just passes us by and we forget about things, we forget about what's happening around us when we are astutely in the present moment. And so activities that give you meaning in life, and often I've heard time and time again throughout my career, the same question, and it's, I don't know what my purpose in life is. I don't know what I get meaning from. I don't know what activities I derive meaning from. And I would ask you to invite the question, what excites me into your life? Because what excites you is what you should be doing. It is your purpose. It is the thing that you'll derive meaning from. And luckily for me, writing has been my purpose largely for most of my life, most of my adult life anyway. And I derive a immense sense of meaning from my writing, immense. But that's not to say it's without fault and it's without challenges. We can still be excited by something, but not be good at it. And I think a lot of times we get wrapped up in this idea that we have to be good at things. And in fact, we don't. We don't need to. If you derive meaning from something, then that is the thing you should be doing, regardless of how good you are. When I first started writing, I was not good at writing. I was told to not sit my English exams in school because I would fail them, and I dropped out shortly after. However, I learned to write by myself in my spare time, and I didn't care that I wasn't very good, but I learned one sentence, one paragraph at a time. Again, when we go back to those small steps. When we are developing habits, we are developing small incremental steps. And I love this idea of small steps because it really does take away this idea of creating a grand goal. And especially it can be hard when it comes to wanting to live a quality life and wanting to live a long life. We might get wrapped up in the idea of the outcome or the goal of having a happy, healthy, long life, when in fact, the happy, healthy, long life is nothing more than the procedure or the systems that you have in place. They are the outcomes. And people often get happiness confused. They think that happiness is something that happens to them, but it's not. It's not the cause, it's the effect. So if you want to live a happy, healthy, long life, then you have to focus on the cause. And these items, these longevity habits I'm sharing with you today are the causes. They might seem simplistic and often overlooked, but I guarantee if you actually implement them, you will see the changes. And yes, certainly, if you try to engage in a meaningful hobby every day for the next month and then you give up, certainly you will feel some level of satisfaction and have some result for that month. But the true test of a good habit is how long it can stand for. So it's the longevity of it. And so coming back now to the second element, we talked about the eudaimonic, the eudaimonic, which is the meaning in life, having a hobby which you derive an immense sense of meaning from. That is one type of hobby, one type of activity, leisure activity. The second is hedonic, and the hedonic is an Epicurist sort of phrase, I would guess. That's where it stemmed from. And often people think of hedonic as drinking wine and eating cheese. And of course, who doesn't love a good glass of red wine and some camembert? However, hedonism and hedonistic activities really are activities that you gain pleasure from. And maybe you don't derive meaning from them, or maybe you have a combination of meaning and pleasure. Often you will. But pleasurable activities, I want you to think small here, not grand, like shopping and, as we've spoken about, drinking wine. But it might be pouring yourself a delicious matcha green tea, sitting down with a book and reading for half an hour every day. That may be a habit, a leisure activity that you derive immense pleasure from. I know I do. I have a pleasurable activity that I do regularly, and I love this streaming platform. It's a very old streaming platform, very old, so be warned if you do check it out. But I personally love Wonderum. It was previously known as the Great Courses, and Wonderum have an excellent series on how to look at art. I love learning about art. I love learning about the history of art and how to approach art. So I watch this series on Wonderum when I am not busy, when I am not regularly immersed in studies or writing. I try to watch this regularly, once a week at least. But I do like to watch it daily. It just helps me wind down. And I don't gain any meaning from watching this art series. None whatsoever. It's not meaningful to me. I just derive pleasure from it. I just derive pleasure from learning about art, and it's a very hedonistic activity for me. So, finding hobbies that are meaningful or pleasurable can really elevate your life, can really elevate the quality of your life, and turning those activities into habits. Now, you can probably hear my little dog in the background, Zeus. He is rolling around on the floor. He's a small French bulldog, and his color is lilac, which is interesting because he's like a pale, like fawn color, but it's known as lilac, which is fascinating. He is the cutest, by the way. You'll have to see him on my. I don't really post about him. Actually, I do have a photo of him on my Instagram. So if you go to @SarahMarieLittle, you'll see him and me smiling in a photo. So, so we've spoken about social relationships and meaningful and pleasurable leisure activities. The next item I want to briefly touch on is physical activity. And I think this goes without saying. I think it's one of those things, but I think it's important to touch on this because physical activity is one of the cornerstone habits of people in the blue zones. It is a cornerstone habit. And I say physical activity, and I have to describe this to you because you're going to think that people in the blue zones take half an hour out or 1 hour out to exercise each and every day. And that's simply true, but it's simply not the whole truth. And the fact is that people who live a long, healthy life, from the moment they get up to the moment they go to bed, they are exercising. And I say exercising in a very broad term, but they are really moving physically regularly throughout the day. So it's a very movement orientated life. And now, if you think about some of the blue zones, a lot of the regions of the blue zones do involve a lot of walking and a lot of activity. And so walking is very much a cornerstone of their physical movement. But they're not only walking, they're constantly moving throughout the day. And it's small, natural movement. So their habit is small, natural movements throughout the day. So it might be weeding the garden, doing the dishes, cooking. A lot of these blue zones, they cook things by hand. They don't use electric beaters or I don't know because I don't have. I cook by hand. I'm very old school, and even when it comes to mowing the lawn, like they don't have ride-on lawnmowers or things like that. They are very old school. And my husband, he wanted to get a ride-on lawnmower, and I'm saying no, 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 no. Let's keep with the push lawnmower because it's movement. But we as a society have learned to make our life easier, but at what cost? And the cost has been in making our life easier, we are losing a lot of our physical, daily, natural movement that we once, we once were engaged in just naturally as a result of living. So if you can, try to move slowly, mindfully, and regularly throughout the day. try taking the bike or walking if you're just going to the shops and they're within walking or cycling distance. Try gardening and mowing the lawn by hand instead of hiring a gardener or using a ride-on lawnmower. So these things, even though they seem small, they do take effort, and that's where making it a habit comes into it. So you might say, I'm going to make it a habit to move throughout the day. But when it comes to it, you've likely got a habit of not being movement orientated and moving in a certain type of way. You're going to have to create a plan to create these new habits. So what do you intend to do to move more throughout the day? And when do you intend to do it by? You might put into your diary every Tuesday and Thursday morning between the hours of 8:30 and 9, I am going to weed the garden. And that is your habit for that morning. It's to get you into these longevity habits, to ease you in. Again, we have to focus on the cause, not the effect. And planning is always going to be a necessary step in order to create a really happy and healthy life. And it would be nice to not have to think about it, but initially it's going to be uncomfortable. Initially, you're going to have to think about it a little bit. So we've spoken now about exercise, and I will say having a healthy diet is a really good longevity habit, but I'm not going to touch on that today because I'd like to focus on personality, and I'd like to focus on behaviors related to personality and not just and not nutrition. So I'm going to put that in there, and we're going to move on. We will move on. So the next longevity habit that I'd like you to embark upon is learning to handle stress, learning to manage stress. And I think this is, again, similar to the social connectedness, one of those habits where we can see ourselves as a type of person. So you might have this idea that you are a type A person, you're tightly wired, you are a perfectionist, you stress a lot, and you have all these I beliefs in your head. An I belief is I am the type of person who. So you might have a I belief about I am the type of person who stresses over the little things. I am the type of person who insert the blank, always gets stressed when I go shopping. And this is really important because we need to work on these I am statements just as we work on our behaviors. Can you hear my little puppy? That's my other little puppy, Luna, in the background. She is the noisy one. We have the noisy one, and Zeus is I don't know what you are, Zeus. He's the teddy bear. Luna is our first puppy, and we lost our other dog last year, and she was very sad. So we ended up adopting Zeus, and she's been happy ever since. I think that goes back to the social relationships. We do better in pairs. We do better as a community. And I was sharing this with my son actually this morning just to deviate from stress a little bit. He asked me who came up with the evolution of the human species. And we often think of Darwin, but Darwin was obviously not the first. In fact, many, many people went before Darwin, men and women. And one of the women who I like, Maria Marian, it's quite an interesting name. She figured out, it was 100 years before Darwin, the evolution of insects. And she figured out how they evolved. And it was very leading edge at the time, especially given that she was a woman. A lot of her concepts were not taken on board. But I was speaking to my son about this and about how, as a society, some human races have died out. And we talked about how human beings have evolved from, you know, um, this very caveman like species to this very smart species that we have been. And it's taken 7 million years. And the fact is that we're not, in a way, we are unique, and in a way, we're not. But there were 20 different types of humans, and all the human, the Neanderthals, etc. And we were one type, and we are the type that survived. You know, and we were discussing about why, and just having this conversation. Why did our species survive and the others die out? And I was sharing with him the importance of social relationships. And, from an evolutionary standpoint, we are stronger together. We are stronger together, and we are happier when we are together. And the other element of that is it's not about just being together, it's about communication. And this is a really important point that I wanted to share with him, especially because he plays a lot of video games and I play with him sometimes, and we work as a team. And this comes back to what we're talking about with stress, is that we are stronger together and we work better when we can communicate with other people. And one of the things about handling stress is that we often go to meditation or to breathing exercises, and certainly I agree, those are fantastic and wonderful habits. But also, we can look at turning to social relationships, turn to communicating with loved ones, and again, bringing that social relationship back into the mix. I cannot stress how important that is to make this a habit, having social relationships, to show up and to share with other people how we are feeling, to share and let them know we need support. It's huge. So, how can you make it a habit to handle stress, to lower your stress in your daily life? Are you going to make it a habit every time you're stressed, you're going to reach out to a friend or a loved one and let them know how you're feeling? Are you going to make it a habit to stop saying, I am? Stop saying, I am the type of person who gets stressed. I have a terrible habit, which I'm working on shifting, in that every time I begin to study something new, I kind of clench up a little bit, I contract. And I should really be expanding. I should be in a joyful state, but I get a little bit stressed and I close up. So I'm learning to let this go, to allow myself the space to just be with the process of learning and not make it a stressful experience. So, stress is one thing that we can't control in life. It's not something that we can ever be rid of. And I certainly can't imagine living a life without stress, because then it would be a life without reward. But how can we learn to handle stress in a productive manner? What habits of rest, relaxation, restoration can we embody and imbue into our daily living? Okay, so we are going to move on to the next item. Now, this is the final item, and this is not an exhausted list by any means, but these are the overarching themes. And this was my intention today, was to give you some overarching themes for your longevity habits. Now, the last item is nature engagement, and to create habits that are centered on the natural world. Again, as a species, I think we have lost touch a little bit with some of these vital health elements. And we've lost touch because we've been moving so ferociously ahead with our society, with productivity, and it's really came at quite a cost to nature and to our connection with nature. But people in the blue zones have a strong bond with nature. And I would invite you to explore creating some habits around the natural world. Now, this does not by any means mean you have to go out and forest bathe, but if you want to, you can. Nature engagement might be going for a swim in the ocean or the swimming pool every Sunday. It might be, again, going to that idea of gardening once a week, being in nature. You might also find that you can do activities that you normally do in your daily life outside. I used to practice my yoga outside and meditate outside. When it wasn't too hot or too cold, I would sit on the grass. Now, 20 minutes is an amazing amount of time, optimal time, I think. But you don't need 20 minutes outside or in nature. In fact, even as little as 5 or 10 minutes can make a huge impact on your happiness levels and your health. So think about how you can invite the natural world into your daily life. If you're living in an apartment, or speaking of the natural world, we have some cockatoos outside. If you're living in an apartment, then see if you can invite the natural world in. Maybe you can bring in a peace lily, which cleanses the air, and sit it on your desk. I love the peace lily also because of the name. Maybe you can bring some other elements in, such as some essential oils of lavender or chamomile. Again, these things do serve a dual impact, because not only is lavender and chamomile a natural element, but it's going to reduce the stress for you. It's going to help reduce any of those stresses and burdens. So how can you make it a habit to spend more time in nature, to engage with the natural world? You might find that instead of going to your local supermarket, which is very devoid of connection with your fruit and vegetables, you go to farmers markets where you talk to the farmers and you learn about the local produce, and you have this relationship with your food, the natural world. Again, you can also change the way you live and get closer to the natural world by shifting the way you work with lighting. This is one thing that I have been very much an advocate for, because your lighting is so important for your sleep. So the minute the light passes through your retina, it's sending signals to the brain, serotonin signals, that it's time to wake up. And the importance of having a pitch black bedroom for sleep, and sleep is one of the foundational things. I should really say that it's the final habit, but it is one of the foundational things, having healthy sleep habits for a long and healthy life. So lighting, how can you block out the light in your room when it's bedtime? Maybe in the evening, you begin to dim your lights as it grows in darkness. Now, I used to live in a small apartment in Sydney, and I could not see the outside world. There was only a small window where my laundry was, and a window where my living room was, but it was frosted, so you couldn't really see out. And that was one of the most challenging times in my life because I wasn't getting the sufficient light in the morning and learning. My body wasn't understanding. My brain didn't know when it was dark. I had difficulty sleeping and difficulty with my happiness levels as well. And so working with lighting to help mirror the natural world might be one habit you'd like to start this year. Okay, that brings me to the end of this episode. Now, we have talked largely about shifting your personality and shifting behaviors that contribute to living a long and healthy life. Not unlike, the centenarians and centenarians in the blue zones, but all of the information I shared with you today is information I learned from conducting my systematic review on the blue zones. And I focused on the personality and behavioral habits of people in the blue zones, near-centenarians and centenarians. And so this comes from my own research. And so I would invite you to think about what habits you'd like to create this year, what longevity habits. Again, less is more. I have a motto that I try to live by, and I say try because it can be very hard to live this way in our world, but I keep coming back to it. I keep trying. I don't think there's ever going to be a place of arrival. I don't think that's possible for me. But it's to do less, but do it better. And if you just choose one thing from this episode and you go running with it for 12 months, 2 months, however long it takes for you to master it, your life will be better. Your life will be better. Your quality of life and hopefully your quantity of life will be better too. But work on one little tiny thing at a time, small steps. Or if you are like me and you can master things very quickly, maybe you'd like to work on one item such as social relationships this month, and next month you're going to focus on activities that bring meaning into your life. And then the following month, you're going to focus on activities that bring pleasure into your life. And then the subsequent month, you're going to focus on reducing stress and so forth. And you can go through systematically these items over the course of a year, and your life will be better. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found this episode helpful. And if you did, please let me know. And apologies again if you can hear my puppies in the background. That's life. Life happens, and we continue. We work through it. We work through the challenges, and we keep moving on. I read this great quote this morning, and I just thought it was beautiful. And I actually printed it out. I cut it up, and I put it on my son's PlayStation so he can see it. Now, I don't know who the author of the quote is, so apologies. If you are interested, please probably just do a Google search. The quote is, "I never lose, I either win or I learn." And I think that sums up the mindset of centenarians. They have a growth mindset. They think about the positives. They think about if they don't make a goal, if they mess something up, if they don't stick to a habit, what did they learn? How can they improve? And how can they move on and move forward? And life is never going to be perfect, but we can continue to work with what we've got, and we can bloom where we are planted. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As we conclude this Live Well for Longer podcast episode, we sincerely appreciate your presence on this journey. Your support fuels our mission, so remember to subscribe and leave your thoughts. And if you'd like to download a positive aging manifesto with 7 traits to age healthy and happy, then visit positiveaginginstitute.com/manifesto. Until next time, live a connected and kinetic life.